Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for a very important educational workshop that, Haley and I at CFA are very excited to have because I feel like it's information that's really hard to find. And no matter how many different places you're, reading about festivals or, top 10 festivals for this, top 10 festivals for that, it still really is an experiential, like asking the right questions and asking people who've been to those festivals. And Katie is a fantastic running a company that does exactly that of telling you what's going to be right for your film, because everyone's films, are for an audience. That's why we make them, and it's such an important part that we get it out to the right audience. So, Katie is one of the founders of Festival Formula, which is essentially festival strategy, which we're talking about today. And as you heard, if you were here a second ago, yeah, you're traveling constantly to festivals, scoping them out for the first time or repetitively, getting to know the community there. And so I'm really excited for you to dive in today. I know you have a presentation to talk more about festival strategy for filmmakers. And just an FYI, Katie does focus mostly on short films, but I think everything you're probably going to learn today can apply somewhat contextually to the feature or episodic world. Have a great talk, Katie. Thank you so much for being here. We love you.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'm going to talk about film festivals and also the different types of festivals. Now, everyone here is going to have the festivals that they know. They're generally going to be those very big aspirational festivals, the kind of deal breaker festivals, the Sundances, the Venice, the Locarno, the Berlinales, and so on. But what I want to do is break those festivals down into the different tiers that we look at as a strategist. So the first kind of tier is generally that top tier. But when we're looking at them as strategists, they generally are the handful of festivals. They're very, very prolific. They're long-standing. They are sometimes some of the original film festivals. But what they all have in common is they are exceptionally premiere-led. So what I mean by that is they want to have like a world premiere or an international premiere or European premiere, and they generally are quite restrictive as to when your production took place. So they often want things made within 12 months of their festival happening. Then you have the fact that they are genuinely industry heavy. So they are festivals that when you look into the audience, you're not going to get the average audience member. You're going to get a lot of press or sales agents and distributors, production houses, anyone that basically is the mover and shaker in the industry. So again, very, very refined audience. They often have a smaller program for shorts, also smaller for features, but just highlighting the shorts element. And sometimes they can only just about make double figures. Like sometimes it's 10, 15 shorts. So very, very hugely competitive, but they can also cost a lot of money. And now the only anomaly in this would be Cannes. It is free to submit, but again, exceptionally competitive. So just to go through these festivals, in case you're unaware. So the first image is Berlinale, which is literally just taken place. Then the second image is Locarno, and that is actually a town square where they kind of screen all the films. It's very, very kind of like epic. Then you have Cannes, which I'm pretty sure everyone here who will have heard of. And the last one is actually Venice, which is the OG film festival. So for us, they are very, very top tier, but they also have a very particular flavor. So I mentioned flavor a lot, and that's kind of understanding the tone of and where your film can play. But these often are very exclusive. They're not kind of very prescriptive with their genres. They're not kind of festivals that are going to play a horror or rom-com or a comedy. They generally are the kind of high-end, highbrow, gutsy dramas. So very, very tough to get into. You've got to have the timing right, but also the right kind of film to be considered there. Next up is what we call the audience-led festivals. So they are generally the biggest chunk. They are the most fruitful because they're a little bit more accessible, because they are less premiere focused. They may still have a premiere stipulation, but it might be a little bit smaller, not as grand as a big, world or international European. They might want a city premiere or a state premiere. So often a little bit more kind of exclusivity, less exclusivity, sorry. Next up is they can still be industry known, and that can be Oscar qualifying, BAFTA affiliated, or it could be Goya affiliated or Canadian Film Screen affiliated, anything that kind of has a stamp of approval from an industry perspective. But the biggest thing for us about these, especially when it comes to shorts, is they have a lot larger programs. So you're not looking at a festival that's taking 10 short films. You're looking at a festival that could be taking up to 200, 300, 500, because they are short specific sometimes. And also, they're not as expensive as people first presume. Now, obviously, money is money. However, you're going to spend it, it's going to rack up. But if you're savvy, you can be spending a lot more. You can submit to a lot more festivals for a lot less money, because these aren't necessarily always going to be expensive, especially at the first deadline. So just to go through the images on the screen, the first one is Aesthetica, which is in the UK in York. It is a fantastic festival. They play about 400 short films. They do play features as well, not a very big program because it is short focused. They have an amazing kind of industry capacity. A lot of kind of visiting industry attend, but also they have masterclasses, workshops, panels. We do an event there every year as a mixer, just to kind of get filmmakers talking to each other. It's also BAFTA recognized and BIFA recognized. Now, BIFA is the British Independent Film Awards. So again, like for a filmmaker that's relevant for, that's going to be a really great selection to get. They can also be industry known, like I just mentioned about those elements. So the second image is actually from Indie Shorts in Indiana. That's the wonderful Coleman Domingo, who attended a couple of years ago with his short film. So you can still get, really great access to networking opportunities, rub shoulders with people who are perhaps a little bit more established than you, but there's no divide. It's not like your shorts program you'll put here and the features take precedent. You're actually kind of in and amongst each other, which is great. The third image, which is with the auditorium, is Clermont-Ferrand, which is the largest short-specific film festival in the world. Takes place in Clermont-Ferrand, which is kind of the center of France. Every year, that is the Cocteau Theatre. It seats about 1,300, and it sells out for every screening. It is a very big, epic market where people from all over the world attend, because there is like an expo where festivals and production houses can have a stand. But also it's very well attended by the locals. Like, it is the kind of locals that queue up to watch the films too, which is amazing. And then the last one, I'm pretty sure most of you will have heard of, which is Tribeca Festival, which this coming edition is the first year that they've knocked on the head their New York premiere stipulation. And obviously, if you've submitted, you'll soon to hear back a yes or a no coming up. And then what we call the next tier is the kind of niche format genre festivals. So these are festivals that have a particular remit, and it might be the format, like the first image, which is a documentary specific festival, or it might be remit, like it's female focused, or it's local filmmakers, or it's about mental health or human rights, or any kind of particular focus. They can be hyper specific. So sometimes they may require the creative, the main HODs, like the director, the writer, producer, to be from a certain background, either by ethnicity or sexuality or location. But it also plays to the strengths of the film, because if you have something that fits their remit, it's going to be very hard for that festival to say no to the film. And that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to match make your film to a festival where they're going, this is perfect, this is bang on remit for us, we really should consider this film seriously. And the last one for this is the community chatter. So if you have a film of a certain type, like I say, genre or theme or format, a lot of the other festivals that work in that space will also be attending other festivals or talking to those festivals. So it's very common, especially you have a genre film like a horror, sci-fi, or thriller, or if you have a comedy or an animation or a documentary, where other festivals will say, hey, I've just seen your film at this other festival and we'd love to consider it for ours. Can we have a screener link to view it? So you can kind of get a lot of traction by being a bit more targeted. Now, just to go through these festivals too, the first one is Filava Documentary Film Festival in the Czech Republic. It's Academy qualifying. If you're working in the documentary space, I definitely recommend checking it out. We've been there a few times. It's generally very cold, but they kind of take over the town. So it is a real kind of, once you step there, everywhere you turn, there's always filmmakers or industry or an event to go to. They do like their experimental documentaries. So again, if you're working in that niche field, definitely check that one out. The next one is Black Star Film Festival in Philadelphia, which is BAFTA qualifying. The next one along is the BFI Future Film Festival, which is taking place at the moment. The remit here, it doesn't matter where you're from, but it has to be under 10 minutes and you have to be aged between 16 and 25. So again, very specific, but if you have a film that fits the criteria, it's perfect for you to go to because it means that there's going to be less competition like a traditional. And the last image is actually Annecy, which is the largest animation festival that takes place in France. That's actually a free submission to submit there. So if you are working in the animation area, definitely check that one out. But you can actually cross the streams. So I mentioned that first festival, Hilava, it's Academy qualifying, but it's also niche because it's just documentary focused. So you can actually merge a lot of these streams just about doing the research. So why is it important to know about the different types of festivals? First of all, from the ground up, you figure out where your audience is. Because what we're trying to stop filmmakers from doing is just kind of spray and pray, just kind of like submitting to everywhere, thinking that you have to go to the top tier first. And then when you hear back from them, you try the festivals below and under. Now, for us, what we're trying to do is kind of make filmmakers really think about where their film suits, not just thinking there's one route, because there isn't. Every festival is hugely different, and every circuit journey that a film has is going to be really, really different. On top of that, festivals will have the best films submitted to them for their remit. So sometimes you might read a call out from a festival and you'll be like, oh my God, the theme that they've got this year is perfect for my film. So therefore you submit. Now, it's not always going to be that easy. But you can look at previous programs, check, if you've got a comedy film, do they have a comedy section every year? But it just means that you're being a little bit more targeted rather than just submitting and just thinking, well, that's it. Like the top festivals are done, and then I just wait. You can save a lot of time and money because you can use that money elsewhere. So it's the difference between submitting to a festival that's like $90 just because it's a big festival and actually going, well, maybe my film isn't best suited there. So let's use that $90 and find 4 or 5 festivals. There's a little bit more tailored to it just to increase that potential of selection. But the biggest thing for us is it's going to help manage your expectations, but also understand your motivations. We often have a chat with filmmakers saying, why do you want to go on the circuit with this film? What's your intention? Now, that can vary. It can be as simple as, well, I've made a new film, I just want to get it seen. Or it could be, I've made this as a proof of concept and I want to see if it's got traction because I want to go back to potential investors and say, hey, this got screenings as a proof of concept. Imagine what I could do if I did the feature. And sometimes it is just to show that you're making work. But it's got to be tailored to your budget, but also the level of festival that you're aiming for, because you just don't want your film sitting on your hard drive just because you spunked all your money on those big festivals and didn't get anywhere. It really is about digging a little bit deeper. So how to start looking for film festivals? It's our day job that we do it all the time. We live and breathe it. But the first thing that always anchors us as to where we're looking is the budget, how much you have to spend on submission fees. Now, obviously, as a company that's focused on this, we have a set budget that we work to, which is £1,000 sterling, which is roughly about $1,200. And that's what we kind of work to because that's a reasonable amount, but also because we don't want filmmakers spending excess money they don't need to, because it's often on festivals that are really not suited. Now, you don't have to have that much budget. It's just knowing what budget you have. And the reason being, if you know you've only got $500 to spend, you're going to spend it better because you're not going to be just submitting to the deadlines that are coming up. You can be a little bit more savvy, a little bit more structured. We spend money as if it's our own. That's why we're very, very conscious of this is a final deadline. It's quite expensive. It's going to eat into the budget. Is it imperative we submit to it this year, or is this a festival that's still eligible next year? There's no premiere. It's not that kind of higher tiered festival. Can we put it to the next year? It's easy for us to make those decisions, but what we're trying to do is kind of train filmmakers to just be a little bit more conscious of how much they're spending, because the one thing filmmakers always say, festivals are expensive. Now, yes, they can be, but if you are spending your money a little bit better and stretching it where you can, it doesn't have to be. We hear stories of filmmakers spending like 3,000 and we're like, that's crazy. You don't need to. You can be a little bit more structured and save some of that budget for travel or for marketing. So when you come to looking at your own film, it's about trying to expand on what it is. It's not just a short film, right? It's going to fit into one of the main purple words here. So live action, documentary, short feature animation. It might be a combination of a few of these. That's the kind of that's the backbone to it. But then if you look around the side, and this is a very small cross section, these are just some assets that you can lean into if your film is relevant. So you've got kind of horror, sci-fi, comedy, student production, excuse me. But then you might have some other focuses, such as like it's an Asian narrative, or it's a dance film, or it could be it's a political documentary. It can get really granular. So, there are festivals that want stuff shot on a mobile phone, but then there are festivals that want stuff shot on a mobile phone in portrait. So it can be really hyper specific. We're almost trying to get people to dial down into what makes their film, because it's not just a film. It's a film about something, or it's about someone, or it's from a perspective, or it's made by someone. And this will help you be a little bit more targeted. So when we're putting together strategies, we ask our clients for a lot of information about their film and a lot of metadata. And this is something that you can do when you're doing your own strategy research and your own submissions, especially if you're working with a team, is to make yourself a cheat sheet. And what we mean by that is it will have all the information that is correct. So it means that whoever is doing a submission, it's always going to be the correct information being fed into that submission. So just some of the areas that we kind of focus in that can be qualifying factors. Production country. There are a lot of festivals that you can only submit to if you've made it in that country of production. So there are festivals and categories that if you're a US production, you have a set category for it, which takes you out of perhaps the international busier category or the genre ones. But if you're a co-production, that can also help you too, because there may be festivals that are set overseas but might have a focus on it. For example, there's a festival in Spain called Americana Film Festival. Its entire remit is US productions. So again, it's a small and niche festival, perhaps something you put towards the end of your run, but they're crying out for US productions only. So it means that you kind of got more opportunity because the rest of the world isn't going to be able to submit there. This can also veer into the nationality of the director. Now, some festivals might be a little bit more prescriptive, like they require the director to be the same as the country production, but not always. So it can often kind of give you another viable asset to explore. Production date. Now, the top tier festivals I mentioned, they do require things made very fresh. So within 12 months of their festival taking place. But the majority of festivals kind of have like an 18-month, sometimes 2-year window. It's going to vary from festival to festival, but the majority of the circuit that's available to you, as long as you've made something within the past year, is going to be accessible. Just check the rules and regulations, because they will stipulate if they do require it to be after a certain date or within a certain year. Duration, I could talk about this a lot longer, but push for time. Every festival is going to have a different cutoff. Sometimes it can be the usual milestones, like 15 minutes and under, like Cannes, or it might be 22 minutes, like Fantasia, or it could be 25 minutes, like Short Shorts in Tokyo. But it's going to vary. And some festivals might have a mid-length. So if you've got a short that runs a bit longer, maybe between 30 and 50 minutes, there may be an opportunity for you there. But like I say, different for every festival. It's always good to check the runtime. It can push you into perhaps a more expensive category if you do run a bit longer. But rule of thumb is it's a qualifying factor. So just look for it, because some festivals might have a category for super shorts where it's under 6 minutes or 5 minutes. Again, just taking you out of that perhaps busier category where everyone's making kind of 10 to 20-minute films. Date of birth, they're not being nosy. It can be just a qualifying factor. So I mentioned earlier, BFI Future, that you have to be between 16 and 25. But there are other variables such as New Fest in Portugal. You've got to be a director under 35 who hasn't made 2 features. So again, can be hyper specific. Or the other end of the spectrum, there's Women Over 50 Film Festival in the UK, where either the narrative or the director has to be a female over the age of 50. So it can vary. It's not always about being a young person. It can sometimes actually kind of put you into a less competitive circuit, just again, increasing that potential selection. Budget is another one. Now, this will vary from festival to festival as well, because one festival may say, we consider anything under 3,000 to be low budget and everything over to be a high budget. Or it could be a festival that's like, we need the entire budget to be under a certain criteria for you to be eligible to submit. But this just kind of puts everything in one place so that when you're looking at festivals, you can kind of go, oh, perfect. That one has exactly the criteria that we have. Or, oh, actually, I found another category that's a bit more, bespoke to my film. And this page that we kind of create, it's about 6-7 pages, because we have like the bios on there, the headshots, the filmography, the credits, and also kind of like the breakdown of the cast and crew as well. So submission methods and where to find the festivals are going to vary. Now, there is no one-stop shop. Now, Film Freeway, which I'm sure most of you will have encountered, is very fruitful. There's quite a lot of festivals on there, but not all of them. So the top tier ones I mentioned earlier, so Venice, Locarno, Berlinale, and Cannes, they are not on a submission platform. You have to submit on their website. So like I say, it's not necessarily about let's just go to Film Freeway and blitz it. You've got to be a little bit more focused on finding the festivals first and then seeing how they accept their submissions. Short Film Depot is another website. It's actually created by Clermont-Ferrand, so it's the only platform you can submit to that festival. But there are other festivals on there too. It doesn't have as many as Film Freeway, but what I will say is Short Film Depot is a vetted platform. So whilst there's a smaller amount of festivals on there, they are all decent and legit. Fest Home is another website, which is Spanish based. Now, what you'll find is some of these festivals have a listing on more than one platform. And that will be because they're trying to target perhaps a different demographic of filmmaker. So a lot of the North American festivals might go on Short Film Depot and Fest Home because they're wanting more submissions from Europe. So there is like sometimes you'll find them listed on different submission platforms. Festival websites, as I mentioned, the top tier, that's quite common. The reason they will never be on a submission platform is they don't need to be. They don't want to be because they always get a lot of submissions anyway, but also because they want to make sure that people who are submitting are putting the effort in because they are very big festivals. And then lastly, email is quite common. Generally for very kind of niche, like experimental or some animation festivals, where when you go to their website and they ask you to submit, sometimes they'll just say, please send us a screener link to this email. So again, they're not necessarily kind of like being listed on the platform because they don't want to have too many submissions submitted to them. So once you've done all that research and you're finding your festivals and putting them down, I urge you, because I've seen in the 20 years I've been doing this, lots of different varieties of people's own strategy. Please put it in deadline order, because this will help you figure out what you're going to potentially miss or what's coming up. But also put as much information down. Now, this is a very colorful strategy that we use. You don't have to have it like this. Anything that's readable, but purely just to put all the information down, including stuff like, does it require a premiere? Where is it located? What are the festival dates that it takes place and what category you submitted to? And like I say, it can vary. So this is a student documentary, which was about IVF. So if you look in the category towards the end, where it's got a little red drawing pin, down there you can see the variety of festival categories it went into. And sometimes it was just standard student film. But then we have a little bit more focus, like health films, because it fits the remit. Science film, because it was touching on the historical science nature of IVF. British short, or women directed, or just short. So it's not always going to be dialed down as much as you'd like, but this just kind of details that how varied it can be. But you can make a document on no matter what, just put everything in order and just keep it up to date. It will also help you keep track of your expenditure as well. But also just for you and your team to kind of go, yes, we've hit the festivals that we wanted to in that territory or in that US state. We've got a coverage that we wanted and so on. So putting it into practice, I like to kind of use a case study just to show you how we kind of approach a film. Now, obviously, I cannot show you the film, but I can talk about it. Now, we're biased, but it's a great film. It's called That Night. So those kind of assets that we pulled out, it's 15 minutes. So for, the majority of festivals, 99.9%, it will be eligible to submit to. It's a live action, it's a short, and it's a UK production. The assets on the camera, so what we can see, the tone, the themes, the narratives. It's a film about friendship. It's also about mental health. It also has a BIPOC focused narrative, and it deals with youth and adolescence as well. It is also a story about grief. So, it's a traditional drama. It's not kind of a comedy. It's not horror. It's not sci-fi. It's a kind of traditional drama, which is the most common piece of content made on the circuit. So you kind of have to be a little bit more focused on stretching those assets you've got to be a little bit more targeted. The assets behind the camera, it's a UK production and it's a female director, but it's not a female story. So that's just something to bear in mind. As I mentioned earlier, some of the festivals can be very, very restrictive, but also quite embracing as well. So we had £1,000, which is about $1,200 to find festivals, and we found 57. So this is what I'm trying to spend my life saying to people, is that you can stretch that budget quite far. You've just got to be a little bit more sensitive about where you're submitting and being realistic with it. So we submitted to a lot of festivals. Most obvious one, it's a short live action. It is a short drama. Like I say, most common piece of film made on the circuit. So it's going to be very, very tough because it's the oversubscribed category. We were looking at the audience led, so still those ones that had industry potential, because this wasn't the flavor of those high tiered festivals at all. So there was no point us wasting time, money, and effort to kind of focus on those festivals. So as a female director, so we were looking at festivals that allowed for non-female specific narratives, but a female behind the camera. And there are plenty around there. And then we were looking at the youth and adolescence focus festivals too. So that's either festivals that had their entire remit, that they wanted youth and adolescent stories, or by category. Sometimes a festival might have a coming of age story or films for teens or anything like that. So with that budget, we found the 57 festivals. We've actually submitted to 68 overall, and that's because we had festivals requesting it, where it played at a festival and they were like, we've seen it, we'd like to consider it for us. So it can have that little snowball effect. But also additions, if the filmmaker was like, oh, actually, we've got some more budget, can we submit to some extra festivals? So this film is still active. It's had 12 selections so far. And I always like to detail when we started submissions and when the last festival that we submitted to takes place, because it is long. It's a tediously slow process. We started submissions for this film this time last year, February last year. The last festival that we've submitted to that we're going to hear back from takes place November this year. So it's quite a long stretch. So far, because it's still active, this film has screened at 5 BAFTA affiliated festivals. 8 BIFA affiliated, that's the British Independent Film Award. So that's hugely relevant for the filmmaker because they are British and it's a UK production. So it meant that they qualified for both those awards bodies and they could submit the film, which is great. It screened at 2 Oscar affiliated festivals, so looking overseas and kind of having that stamp of approval. 2 Movie Maker recognised festivals, and 2 European Film Award affiliated festivals too. Now, like I say, not all of these awards bodies are going to be relevant to each production, but they are a nice shorthand for you to understand the level of the festival and how it translates to the industry. This is just a small selection, of the screenings that the film has obtained so far. The reason I like to share this is mostly to show you that, the universality of the story, it can travel. That's what you're trying to do, is get your film on the circuit in different places. So whilst this is a UK production, it's played at US festivals. So it actually premiered at Palm Springs last year. It also played at Holly Shorts last year. But then looking at the other festivals, there's Bolton in the UK, which is BAFTA and BIF affiliated. It's played at Kerry, which is in Ireland. Played at Aesthetica, I mentioned. It played at British Shorts this January, which again It's a festival in Berlin who only wants UK productions. So again, we've dialed it down because that's exactly what they're after. And we were like, hey, presto, it makes sense for us to submit there. That's also free as well and not on a submission platform. You have to go to their own website. But then also honing in on the female aspect, the film is playing at Up Tilt next month, which is in North Carolina, which is again female focused too. So this is me kind of saying a culmination of all our research and understanding the strengths of the film and perhaps where some of the weaknesses were. And when we say weakness, we mean not suitable for a festival. This wasn't suitable for the top tier, but what we've still done is get this filmmaker a real healthy amount of selections that mean something. So when they're having those career conversations as a UK filmmaker, they can say, yeah, my film's played at Academy qualifying festivals over the pond. And then someone in the UK is going to go, yeah, we know those festivals. So it makes sense. So let's have a chat. Let's talk about your other projects. But also leaning into those assets that make it stand out for certain festivals, the female part, the British aspect, and the fact that it's under 15 minutes, again, kind of helps you navigate the circuit a bit better. So I wanted to do some FYIs because after doing this for so long, I do hear the same questions and it's completely valid. Now, what I do want to say is there is no regulatory body for film festivals, which is slightly terrifying because what that means is there is no set way for a festival to do something. If you go to one festival and they have a particular setup, it doesn't mean that everyone else will have the same. But what it does mean is that there are some untoward festivals that perhaps are not well organized or they do things very differently. So every time we say a decent, legit festival should do this, there will be a festival that is not decent, not legit, who does do it, which is unfortunate, which is why we're trying to encourage filmmakers to do as much research as they can. So once you've been selected, you get that very happy email or phone call. Be prepared with your materials from day one, especially if you are perhaps submitting to a later deadline, which means that you're going to have a quicker turnaround. Just have everything prepped. And I will do a slight little kind of amendment to this. If you are submitting a work in progress, please submit it as a picture log because that's what the festivals want to see. They want to see the execution of your narrative, but also the runtime. If you are submitting a work in progress, see that the festival allows that first, but also just bear in mind when that festival is going to take place, is your film going to be finished in time? That's the main thing. When you get that selection email, you'll be given a few deadlines. And the first one will be when they want all the materials from you. So they will say, we need this film file by that date, or we need you to fill in this attendance form by this date. But the other deadline that they might give you, again, not every festival, but majority do, is an embargo date. And what that means is a date that you can announce your film after. If you announce it before, you do run the risk of the festival withdrawing the film, and you don't want that because you got the selection. So just make sure you read everything, especially if you're going to be sending it out to your cast and crew. Highlight that they cannot announce it until after a certain date. That is the most important thing that we can encourage you to do. Just read it. If they don't mention an embargo date, there is no harm in you emailing them back saying, am I okay to announce this? Just better to be safe than sorry. But just definitely kind of don't, if they do have an embargo date, do not announce on socials, website, or anything before that date. Next is reading exactly what the festival's asking for. So I mentioned film files. Now, there is an inbuilt capacity for filmmakers to want to send the best quality file of their film ever. And we get that, we understand it. But again, every festival is governed by their venues that they use and the capability of the screening potential they have. So, for example, a festival might not be in a traditional theatre space. So therefore, they may ask for a ProRes 422 because they're going to be streaming it via a laptop onto a pop-up screen. They may request a DCP in a particular way. Just adhere to that because you don't want to send them something too good because they're either going to say we can't accept it, or if time is limited, they'll have to accept it, but it might not play correctly when you get to the screening. The easiest thing to do is, if you don't have the correct files, is to ask them, when's the absolute latest I can give it to you? Like, communicate. We've had it at the moment. We have a film in South by Southwest. and there was a slight error with the DCP that the filmmaker created, which means we had to ask for an extension, but we asked for the extension before the due date, and they were fine. They were like, yeah, absolutely. They did say the longer you leave it, the less time we have to quality check it our end. So you do run that risk of kind of losing out. So just make sure everything is kind of done exactly what the festival needs. This also goes with copy length. So a festival may say, can we have your log line? It's got to be under 25 words. Don't give them a paragraph. There's two reasons. One, it means that you haven't listened or read what they've said. But secondly, you basically are passing the buck to the festival. And sometimes a festival may rewrite it for space and it may not be what you like. So the best thing is to have everything as tightly as you can. So if they do need to tweak it, it's not going to be absolutely butchered. Our rule of thumb is logline is one sentence, 25 words and under. And a brief synopsis is 40 words and under. Now, if your synopsis is the same as your logline because it's strong, great, use that. But don't feel like you have to pad out everything. Your synopsis should tease tone and story, but not tell absolutely every single narrative beat. Don't start a synopsis or a logline with a short film about. We know it's a short film. You're wasting time and words. You just want to be a little bit more textured, a little bit more focused. Don't leave things till last minute, because that is more room for error. Like I say, if you need to ask for extension, chat to the festival. They may be able to help you. A lot of festivals now will say we only screen DCP. We have a relationship with a DCP provider that can give you a cut rate if you require one. So again, just make sure you've got all your options covered. And keep talking to the festival once you've been selected. And that could be anything like they might be doing Instagram live interviews in the lead up to the festival. They may want to collaborate on a post on Facebook, or they may want all of your social tags so they can kind of do a little spotlight on the film. It's not something you need to bombard them with before being selected. Funnily enough, they don't want to talk to you until that point, but after, absolutely. And also goes for attendance. Some festivals may be able to give you some support. Where I am right now, at Sedona International Film Festival, every selected filmmaker gets put up for 4 nights for free in a hotel. You also get free lunch and dinner at the parties in the evenings, and there's a shuttle that takes you around if you don't drive. Now, again, not every festival. I will say the larger the festival, ironically, the less they can give you. They may be able to give you a hotel discount, but it's still going to be at a very high profile hotel. But if they know that you're coming, they may be able to help accommodate. It's quite common for a lot of the regional festivals in the US to do homestays, where they've kind of embraced the local community, and they'll kind of open up any spare rooms or houses or condos that they have to kind of offer up to the festival. And sometimes, they will pick you up from the airport if it's going to help get you there. So again, every festival is very different, but if they offer something, ask about it. You never know. So again, we have a lot of myths that we kind of get thrown our way, and I just want to kind of help dispel as many as I can. So the first myth that we always hear is you have to know someone to get your film screened. Now, 20 years of doing this, it's not the case, because it's down to the film. Now, again, that caveat I mentioned earlier, there will be festivals that do this, but they're perhaps the festivals you don't really want to be dealing with. We know programmers from very top tier festivals to very small genre niche festivals. It doesn't guarantee anything. From our perspective as a strategist, what it means is we know what they like and what they don't need, but they're still got to like the film. They've got to be able to stand by that film and go, we've curated this because this is what we wanted to share with our audience. The other most common one is films are not watched by the festivals. Now, this is kind of tied into people sitting and like a hawk watching their Vimeo analytics. Vimeo themselves have come out and said that they are not absolutely correct. And there's been lots of kind of case studies of people watching a film and it not registering within their team. Any decent, legit festival will watch your film, and it may be watched once, twice, 4 times, depending on the setup of the festival and the programming team and the judging rounds. The slight amendment I will make to that is if you've sent them a 20-minute film and after 6, 7, 8 minutes, they just know tonally it's not for our festival, they may not watch the rest of the film. And I realize that is quite galling to hear, but as a programmer, when they're sifting through films, they're looking for any reason to say no because they have so many films to go through. If they already can judge a film and go, this is not going to sit well with our audience, there's no reason for them to continue watching the rest of the film because, and again, I realize this is annoying, they don't have to give feedback to you on your film because they're not selecting it. So it's just something to be aware of. But honestly, like any decent legit festival will watch the films, and try not to drive yourself absolutely cuckoo by looking at Vimeo analytics. An EPK helps selection, having electronic press kit. It doesn't, because a lot of these festivals, when they're viewing the films, it's just the film that they're seeing. They're not seeing all the other periphery stuff. Now, it's helpful to have if you get into a festival that has a large press attendance, like Tribeca or South by or Slam Dance, Sundance, and so on. But it's not going to be the key factor of your film getting selected. Same goes for a poster, same goes for a trailer. There's going to be no film. If the film's good, the film's good. It's not going to be turned down because it doesn't have any of those items. You need to write a cover letter for every submission. We don't write cover letters because the majority of festivals don't read them. I can probably name about 5 programmers that do, but they read it after they've watched a film and if they're interested. And the only reason they're doing it is to see if there's any extra information that perhaps wasn't clear. Student production, debut film, local filmmaker, alumni, and so on. But the cover letter is not going to be the deciding factor of your film getting selected. Again, much like not having an EPK. Our rule of thumb is they neither help nor hinder. So if you do want to do them, go ahead, do them, but don't write them with the fact that it's going to seal the deal, because it's not, and you can waste a lot of time and effort. And the last one is, if you contact the festival after you submit, it helps. Funny enough, it doesn't. It can actually end up being detrimental. Festivals receive a lot of submissions. Realistically, you can email them, say, just to let you know I've submitted my film, but they're not really going to have anything to respond apart from, great, thanks. So I think the main thing for us is you can't push your way into getting a selection because you've got to be submitted and considered by everyone else on the team. But just kind of limit. The only time that I would say to get in touch with a festival is perhaps if there is a clash of premiere. And that might be you reaching out to a festival saying, hi, I've just been approached by another festival that are looking to secure a premiere. I just wanted to know, are you through the selection process yet? Is there anything that, we need to be aware of to let you know? That's a reason. Any other reason is not really viable for you to kind of pester a festival. And I'm sorry I've whizzed through that so much, but I wanted to leave time for questions. So let's do some questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, let's have some questions because we have a little time. I was even taking notes on some festivals I'd never heard of before. Okay, if you have a question, totally willing, like unmute yourself, say hello, introduce yourself, and then what your question is, or feel free if you don't want to do it over voice or video, you can just message it in here and we'll ask for you. But yeah, who wants to ask a question? I know, Kirsten, you had a question, right? You texted me. You were like, I have a question. So, okay, you go start us off.
Okay, hi Katie. How are
Hello.
you? I
Good.
love every time you do one of these workshops. I learn so much. I was curious that I'm really new to this space, and you mentioned that it's a myth that you need to know someone in a film festival in order to get your film screened. If you submit your film to a festival during the extended deadline, should there be any concern of whether or not it'll get seen and considered because you submitted at that very last deadline option?
Yeah. So again, like a great question, and I'm pretty sure there'll be other people in this room that are also thinking it too.
Mhm.
So again, any decent, legit festival will consider it. The way that we look at it is we've had selections on early bird, regular, late, extended, and so on. The film is the film. What I would be aware of, and this is more kind of the red flag festivals, is if their extended deadline is so close to their actual edition date,
Mhm.
that would be a massive red flag for me. And especially if it's a bumped up cost for you to submit to that extended deadline. I think with features, it's slightly different because there's a little bit more premiere stipulation around it and so on. But with shorts, I wouldn't be too concerned about submitting to a final deadline, apart from what I've just said, if it's like a red flag kind of element. The only thing I'd be aware of is just the cost.
Okay.
because sometimes those extended festival deadlines can be a much higher cost. Some festivals will extend a deadline because of extenuating circumstances. I know some festivals extended it because of the wildfires, and they didn't bump up the price. It was just like an extended deadline for the same cost as the deadline previously. But no, I wouldn't be too concerned.
My other question is that you had mentioned that you want to try to refrain from reaching out to film festivals unless absolutely necessary. In one of the EDFC workshops, you kind of touched on waivers a bit with film festivals. And I know some like Bend Film in Oregon, they offer some waivers for certain minority groups. And so my question is it okay to reach out to film festivals regarding maybe disability specific waivers, or should we also not do that?
I think it's dependent on the festival. I know that a lot of festivals now are writing like, do not ask us for waivers. We won't give them. If you email us, we will ignore it. I think there's got to be a rhyme and a reason to do it. And a lot of festivals like Bend do have like a detailed, breakdown of the discounts they can offer.
Mhm.
I think festivals can get really pissed when you do email them about waivers, because what it makes it sound like is your festival was an afterthought for them. I think alumni discounts is always something to reach out for, but it's not always guaranteed.
Okay.
But perhaps it might be, I mean, we have some clients where if they are selected and they have certain accessibility requirements,
Mhm.
that can help them dictate, do I submit to a festival? So that's an option where that filmmaker may email a festival and say, hey, I'm considering submitting to your festival, but if I am selected, there are certain requirements I need. Do you have them before I spend money on your submission fee? And that might open a conversation of, well, actually, we can give you a discount and we do have these accessibility issues or venues for you. So I think it's kind of, as long as you can tailor it, then it's okay. It's less kind of interesting for them if it is literally like a copy and paste, like,
Right.
I'm a broke filmmaker, please give me a discount.
Right. Okay. I was
Oh,
asking because, like, using Bend Film as an example, they do include like a lot of different minority groups.
yes.
Unfortunately, like disability isn't in a lot of those. It's a growing conversation, which is fine.
Mm,
And so that's why I was curious about that because it tends to be an afterthought, not maliciously, but sometimes it is.
yeah,
So that's why I wasn't sure like if it'd be okay. But that's really good information. Thank you.
no
Thanks,
worries.
Kirsten, for starting us off. I see we have lots of questions. So I saw in order, I'm just going to go through that. So I know, is it Amilcar? You actually had your hand
Yeah.
raised first without raising your hand on the Zoom. So I remember this. And I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. Go for it. And then I'll go through Jonathan, Abid, Galina, and Rana. And I apologize if I screwed up your name. But Amilcar, please.
Okay, perfect. So my question is about strategy. This is our strategy, right? So I am submitting to Cannes a short film I did, 6 minutes. It's a comedy, and I have a very high profile actor on board and so on. So I 2 weeks ago I asked for the accreditation for Cannes as independently of my submission of the short film next week. And it got rejected. I am French, but I am Dominican, and the story is about the peanut vendor, like Latin American story. Being French, submitting to Cannes, my strategy, as you were mentioned before, about how you position yourself as director, that like what is your point of view or advice for me in my case, positioning my film as a director, as a Dominican director or as a French director, Dominican roots. I don't know, like, if that makes sense, because
So
also I imagine they might consider minorities or things like
Yeah, no,
that.
it's a valid question. I think it can vary for the festivals. So for some festivals, you're going to be seen as an international filmmaker because it's a festival outside of your country production or where you're based. And for other festivals, it might be you're a national filmmaker because of your location. I think the accreditation with Cannes is always a tricky one because I think sometimes people do get turned down, but it's probably just because there is just such a vast number of accreditations
Yeah, yeah.
through. But I think being aware of the story you're telling and who the story you're telling on screen is just as important about where you submit to. So is your narrative about a Dominican narrative too?
No, it's about the peanut vendor. You know the peanut vendor song? Peanut.
Okay.
Yeah, so
It's
it's
like,
about
okay.
it's inspiring that and yeah, like I just created a fictional character, the peanut vendor and his dog. They are it's a comedy where they serve and they help. Sometimes they help, sometimes they sell. That's the
Okay. I think, I mean, definitely utilize the asset of your nationality, but like I say, it might kind of, you might have to flip flop between, like, depending on the festival that you're submitting to. Um, Also, if in doubt, email the festival before you submit because they will appreciate the fact that you are being a bit more focused on where to submit in what category. And they may be able to advise you. We've had it before where we may have a French director, but it's a German production, and we're submitting to a French festival, and we will reach out to them and say, look, French national director, but German production, like what would you prefer us to submit to that will help you in the selection process? And they will always come back and advise. So I think, worst case scenario before you spend money is just email the festival if you're unsure.
And then for the onshore, and I think that's where Festival Formula and other entities help. Like where a part of you guys, let's say, like where else I can find like support on the more strategy consultancy kind of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
General advice.
there's lots of kind of collected, I suppose, lists of festivals that might be like top 25 coolest or top 50 worth the entrance fee, which are both movie maker lists. That's a good place to kind of look at. But also, I think when you hear a filmmaker talk about a festival, that can often help you decide if you do want to submit there or not. Filmmakers are very honest. So if they've had a great time, they'll tell you. And if they've had a bad time, they'll tell you. I think anytime you hear a negative, it's always with a pinch of salt because sometimes a filmmaker goes to a festival and expects everything, but it might not be a festival that can deliver everything, but they can deliver you something. So I think talking to filmmakers, but also, you know, go to as many film festivals as you can. And if there's a film that you've seen on the circuit, or if you watched it on Short of the Week or Director's Notes or Film Shortage, look at where they've also screened. And that's a really good way of you figuring out a film that might have a similar tone to yours. And then you'll be able to see where they've previously been selected. And that can also be a little bit more of a tailored approach of, oh, this is a comedy that's similar to mine and it's played at these types of festivals. That can be a really good resource as well.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, we have 6 questions here and about 5 minutes, and I know we can't go over too much because you have a talk. So, Jonathan, tell us what your question is.
Hi, real quick question. I just finished my short film, Hallelujah. But I am the producer on the film, so I've been submitting to festivals. I am not a student. However, my director is a student and she's in school until May now. Can I still qualify that film for like the student discount when submitting my film, or how does that work?
So it will vary from festival to festival. Some festivals will just require the director to be a student and be in education when the film was shot. And other places will require the production to be a student production, i.e., it was part of a thesis or part of a seminar or some kind of production that was commissioned for intensive purposes by the student education body.
Mhm.
So it will vary. You'll have to kind of look at the rules and regulations for each festival.
Okay.
Sometimes a festival might say, if you're submitting to the student category, you have to email us the student ID, otherwise you will be disqualified. So again, look at the individual festivals you're considering. And again, if if it's not very clear, email them because they
Okay.
say to you, yeah, that's absolutely fine as long as the director's in education, fine. Or they might say, actually, no, we require, the film school to be in the credits at the end to qualify it as a student production.
Okay. Thank you so much. This was great.
No
Thank
worries.
you. All right, I'm doing this in the order, so no one is forgotten. I promise.
I can go slightly over, by the way. I can go slightly over. Like,
Okay,
don't worry. Yeah.
perfect. Thank you. All right, is it Abid? Abid?
It's Abby. It's very good.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Katie, for your clear explanation. It's very, very worthwhile being here. I have two quick questions. First one, it's about you talked about ordering your festival strategy in a sheet on application date. I think that's very sensible thing to do. But on the other hand, I heard the festival circuit is like working like a pyramid or a fountain kind of way. So the smaller festivals tend to look up to bigger stages, bigger festivals with a better status. So should you take that also into account when you look where you apply?
So yes and no. So the way that we always look at it is, unless you are aiming for a festival that requires a big premiere, as like a world or an international European, you can, like, let's say that your film isn't going for that type of level. You can park that. You can still arrange your festivals in an order where they are kind of a mixture of more aspirational, a bit higher, more profile festivals, and below. Because as long as there's no premiere clash, that's absolutely fine. Like, we've had clients that have played like 10 festivals and then got into Sundance. And then we've also had films that have played at Clermont-Ferrand as their world premiere and then gone on to Aspen. So there's no kind of hurdle unless there is a premiere to consider. What I would advise, and this is just being fussy on behalf of the filmmaker, is the very small festivals, like perhaps the more niche ones or the kind of very small fry festivals, you can leave towards the much later down the line, because they perhaps are what we would call low-hanging fruit. They're an easy selection. You want your selections to speak on your behalf. So, like aiming for those ones that have Oscar qualification for them, or kind of movie maker magazine recognition, because they are generally a little bit higher up in the pecking order. So you can structure it, but also just when we put it in deadline order, we can also flip it and put it into the order that the festivals take place, and they're very wildly different. So really good example, we created a strategy for a short horror film, and we want the filmmaker to submit to Sitges in Spain, which is like really big horror festival, but we also are recommending they submit to Mollins Horror in Spain too. The deadline for Mollins is like in the next week or so, and Sitges isn't even opened yet. But if you flip them into the order they take place, Sitges happens first and requires a Spanish premiere, and Mollins happens the month after and doesn't require a premiere. So sometimes it is about kind of looking at it both ways: the date order of the deadline, also when they take place. And you can, like, the reason we do that is for coverage, so they're not missing opportunity, also for cost, because if they submit to the early bird deadline for Mollins, it keeps it down, but it's also not impinging on Sitges. So it's a bit of a like spinning plates admin kind of vibe, but it really pays off dividends just to be a little bit more structured.
Yeah, great. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. The other small one is we've submitted our film to the Clermont-Ferrand this year. However, it didn't get selected, but we were highlighted as a Clermont-Ferrand market pick. So does it make sense to look at Short Film Depot and target the festivals that are on there because it is Clermont-Ferrand organized, or does it work like that?
So that's a really good thing to get a pick on the Clermont-Ferrand market, because it's essentially saying, like, these couldn't make the program, but we are giving our stamp of approval that these are really good ones to look at. Now, Short Film Wire is like an online market, so it means that a lot of other festivals are going to be on there. You will get a lot of emails saying, we saw your film on the short film market at Clermont-Ferrand, here's a discount code. A lot of them will be phishing emails, which means they've just sent it to everyone. And our rule of thumb is if they're genuinely interested, it should be a full waiver, 100%, not just a discount. There are a few festivals that kind of utilize Short Film Wire in an unnerving way, because you just send out lots of emails. Look at Short Film Depot. It's much smaller. But what I will say is, like, don't necessarily feel like you are just locked into one submission platform. Look at the festivals and then find out where they select their films from. That's probably the best way to do it.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Okay, Galina.
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for this talk. I have a question about BFI London Film Festival. So I've made a short film, which is a drama with body horror elements, not too dissimilar to The Substance or Night Bitch. And I've already received a lot of rejections from the A-list festivals, which is fine. So the film will premiere now at Poppy Jasper. But my question is, because obviously I was hoping for an Oscar qualifying premiere, a BAFTA qualifying premiere. I've already received a lot of rejections there, but after Poppy Jasper, I have a BIFA qualifying selection, and I'm gonna still pushing to everywhere else I haven't submitted. But is it still worth it me sending it to BFI London Film Festival, considering it's not going to be a UK premiere anymore once it screens at the BIFA qualifying festival.
Okay, is it a UK production?
It's a UK production, yeah. It just so it happens that the first
Hello?
screening will be in. Yes.
Okay, no worries. Sorry, I think my internet glitched there. So, as it's a UK production, BFI London have a very particular clause, it's really annoying that they've done it, which essentially says that you can't have played an international festival before their edition. So you will actually be ruled out. You'll not be eligible to submit because of the selections taking place before BFI's next edition. So what I can say to you is like it won't be eligible. So you can save the money from there. But I also would say, as a UK production, look at the other BIFA qualifying festivals because they are a little bit more accessible because a lot of them are short specific, which can kind of help kind of increase that potential selection. But also, some of those festivals on those lists do talk to each other. They do attend each other's festivals. So it might be whilst you've been turned down for one festival, it's very common for people to program and curate for other festivals as well. So you might find that some of those other festivals will kind of pick up the film and perhaps get in touch. But I would say just because of the eligibility criteria, you won't be eligible for BFI London, which if anything, I know that's a bit of a bummer to hear, but it saves you some money.
Mm. And just another question, when you have those selections, is it worth, I'm updating the Film Freeway with the selections, but is it worth adding laurels or things like that? Because when you have a few laurels, you don't want to add them, you want to wait for them to pile up, but which one is more helpful to you? If you're just adding the selections in the Film Freeway info of screenings or actually adding the laurels to your thumbnail?
So I think definitely keep the selections updated on Film Freeway, just because it helps film festivals kind of have a shorthand of like where you've previously screened, and sometimes that can help them by going, "Oh, Cleveland selected it. They're very similar to our taste. It means that we're going to like this film," or because they want to know how fresh the film is. In terms of thumbnails, I think sometimes it can help festivals again with that shorthand, but it's about making sure that those laurels are good and decent and they do translate. Like I think sometimes we'll see a filmmaker who submitted to like a monthly online festival and they've been given like 10 laurels from one place. It doesn't reflect well. You kind of want those festivals to mean something and speak on your behalf. So we don't require a filmmaker to update their thumbnail, but we have some filmmakers that do. But it's generally for when they get a selection, like a selection at a time, and they'll just update it. So yeah, it's entirely up to you. I think it's again, it's not going to be something that a festival is going to go, oh, definitely going to select the film because of that.
And just one last thing. I think you've attended Poppy Jasper before in the States. How would you rate it? Would you say it's worth attending, or what was your experience?
It's a great festival. It's like definitely kind of a really lovely team that run it. It's a festival that perhaps is not helpful if you don't drive because the locations, they kind of cover 5 locations. The programming, they have very kind of, as you would have seen when you submitted, there are set categories that they kind of program to. It's one of those festivals that I would say it's a really lovely location and you'll have a lot of memories from there. It's not the kind of glitzy glam festival. It's not the kind of like every audience is packed out. But that's just because they play perhaps too many films. Like a lot of festivals do that, where they've got so many screenings at the same time. But if it's one that you can attend, I would recommend it. We're going. We've gone for the last couple of years, and it's gone from strength to strength. And if you've been dealing with Matty, you'll know like how lovely she is and how welcoming she is too.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
All right, thank you so much. Great physical media collection behind you. Rana had a question, and I apologize if you said your name wrong. I'm just going to read it out. Hi, Katie. If a film isn't accepted in a festival, but they offer showing it in the festival's online film market, what's your take on that? Is it positive to show the film in the market, even if it's still touring? Thank you.
Good question. I will say it's dependent on the festival and the market. If it is kind of private behind a paywall, behind it's not streaming freely for anyone to view, then it is a good consideration. It's becoming quite common now off the back of the pandemic, where festivals were doing a hybrid version, that some have retained it, and that's purely because industry professionals perhaps don't want to travel as much, or the funds for people have kind of gone down. So I think it's always beneficial, but again, it's dependent on the festival, and how their setup is. So something like Short Film Wire for Clermont-Ferrand, there's a lot of industry eyes on it. There's also other selected filmmakers. It's limited coverage, like you have to register an account to then watch it and so on. But yeah, possibly a good opportunity for sure.
Awesome. And our final question, let's see, Caleb, do you still have a question? I know you had your hand raised earlier. Caleb Roberts, if you have a question, feel free to ask it. If not, oh, there, Caleb. Hey, yes, if there's time for this one. Unsure whether I should be submitting my UK Ireland queer focused BFI short to the UK category or queer selection of the likes of Leeds, Rain Dance, etc. Thanks.
Again, it will depend on what the festival categories are. I always think if you have a queer film and they have a queer bespoke category, do that, because you're showing you understand the benefits of your film for their consideration. But like I kind of I'm not sure if you were here earlier, but that kind of case study of the strategy I created for a student documentary, you'll see that it wasn't always cut and dry. Sometimes a festival at the point of submission, when you're saying, I want you to consider my film, it can sometimes be as simple, is it a short or feature? Is it live action, documentary, or animation? But if they have a bespoke category, lean into it, because it shows that you as a filmmaker are understanding what they need, but you're also understanding what you have. And that is perfect synergy.
Awesome. What a great answer. That's a perfect synergy. We are gonna, I'm sorry, Samilia, if that's I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. You're amazing. I'm going to give you Katie's email, because can people reach out to you if they have additional questions? I just want to make sure you can get to your talk in 20 minutes.
Yeah, so if the easiest thing to do is to email our info page, because then it means that the whole team can answer them as well. So it's info@festivalformula.com. I do recommend browsing our website on the Slate page. You'll see the films that we are handling or advising. But also, if you follow us on socials, it's a good resource for festivals, because you'll see where we're traveling. We also see what films we're taking on, but also the selections that we're getting for our films. And chances are you might not have heard of some of them, but it means that you've got the festival info that you can go and check them out. And you can also see, oh, this festival accepts a lot of comedy or documentary and so on. So yeah, come follow us.
Awesome. Katie, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you mentioned this on the call, but I may have, maybe you didn't, maybe you did, but everyone should also, in addition to checking it out, submit their films to get feedback and see, because you do free feedback, right? If they submit.
Yeah, I didn't mention that actually, so thank you for the nudge.
Yeah.
So our process to consider any film is we watch everything for free to consider for our slate. We give feedback for free, even if we're saying no. We do say no like a festival would. The reasons that we say no might be because the film is too old, too niche, too long, or perhaps we just don't think there's enough traction for us to garner for you. We're very honest. We're not going to take stuff on just because it's money for us. We're very, very protective. And if you go to our website, and you'll see the contact us page, and there's just a form to fill in. I will stress, we only take short live action narrative and animation under 30 minutes, documentary 40. It's got to be for 2024 onwards. And you can also detail there if you've done any submissions previously and so on. But yeah, we watch everything for free to consider it for free. And we just want to keep it that way, so we're accessible for everyone.
Awesome. And shameless plug, but thank you for being a sponsor of the CFA Film Challenge, where a winner of the challenge is going to be getting your springboard package for festival strategy. So thank you so much. Everybody, we're all doing a virtual round of applause for Katie. Thank you so much, and have a great talk there in Sedona, and we'll hopefully catch you soon. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Lovely to talk to you all.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.